Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey. This November international break seems to be quite a brutal one, so this video is intended to help you get back into the groove of FPL ahead of Game Week 12 and to give you all of the updates that you require on player injuries, suspensions and players returning ahead of the Game Week 12 deadline. Welcome back everyone to another video. Today's video is going to be a little bit different to my normal run-of-the-mill game week by game week content. Today I'm going to be taking a look at some of the big injuries that have occurred during the international break and of course some of the players that might be returning pretty soon, and taking a little look ahead at what we might need to prepare and plan for over the next couple of game weeks. So a little bit different. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you did enjoy it, I'd massively appreciate a like on the video and importantly, hit subscribe to the channel. We're just 100 subscribers away from 5,000 now. If I can get there before Christmas, that would be my Christmas present. So thank you so much in advance if you're willing to do so. Let's start off with one of the more obvious injuries that I think most of us will know about by now. But of course, if you've been taking a little bit of a break, this might be news to you. Gabriel went off injured for Brazil in the international break against Senegal on the 15th of the 11th, so a few days ago now. So that was on the Saturday. So I'm recording this on the Monday. We haven't really heard too much additional information. He did pull out of the Brazil squad though, so we don't think we'll be getting anything concrete from Ancelotti over the next few days, because if he's pulled out, they probably won't be assessing him in-house. We'll probably have to wait for an update from Mikel Arteta when he gets back to Arsenal, which usually doesn't bode well because Arteta does tend to be pretty tight-lipped. Now, I won't go into all of the details of several physio experts on X and all of these kind of things because it's all just speculation at this point. But what we do know is that he pulled up off the ball during the game with what looked like a little bit of a thigh or groin kind of injury, and he had to come off immediately. Basically, it doesn't look great, but we don't have any confirmation that he's even definitely going to be out of Game Week 12 yet. So I would hold fire on any transfers. Who knows? We might get good news that he is indeed available for Spurs, or that it's a relatively short-term injury. It doesn't have to be a long-term one, and it might only rule him out for the weekend, and possibly he'll be back by Game Week 13. I think if that's the case, because he's such an important player, because he's been so crucial to FPL success so far this season, I would try my very hardest to hold on to him if you can. Even if he's out of that Spurs game, if it looks like he's back for Game Week 13, I'd try to hold on to him. A lot of us have value kind of accrued in him over the last few game weeks. He's risen in price a lot, so buying him back later, if you sell him now, will be more difficult. And let's face it, he's been one of the best players that you could possibly own this season. So if he misses one game week, as long as you've got a decent enough substitute coming off the bench, I think it's fine to just hold him. And then we've got him for the next few game weeks. However, if he is out for a little bit longer, I think it's best at this point to have plans in place for what we would do with him. So I've compiled a few different options for you in case if we do get bad news and he is out for a little while longer. I think first and foremost, the obvious transfer is to move him across to another Arsenal asset. If you don't have double Arsenal defence already, you probably still do want some Arsenal coverage. Even if Gabriel is out, they're still a good defence. So going over to someone like a Timber or a Saliba would be maybe the more boring route. He's not got much attacking threat, not great on the defcons, but we know he's pretty much guaranteed 90 minutes a match. With Timber, maybe a little bit more risk for minutes, but he has been very good on minutes so far. The only reason I'd say that there is a risk is because Ben White has been getting a few minutes here or there in other competitions. And especially with Game Week 14 coming, we'll talk about that in a moment's time. But midweek FPL is back in this next chunk of fixtures. I wouldn't be massively shocked to see some rotation to the fullbacks at Arsenal. So I do like Timber, but I wouldn't be stunned to see him rotated in Game Week 14. And then there's another midweek later on around Christmas where he might get rotated. I have him. I still really like owning him. But if I'm buying now, Saliba might be the more safe pick, let's say. Virgil van Dijk is also going to be probably one of the more obvious routes. That is mainly if you don't already have Arsenal defensive coverage outside of Gabriel. I do like Virgil van Dijk. He's great on the defcon for a Liverpool player anyway. And of course, he's got some attacking threat. The main weakness here is that Liverpool defensively haven't really looked all that solid yet. But it is worth noting that they've had some pretty tough fixtures in the opening 11 game weeks, and the fixtures to come are very, very positive, especially when you look at each individual fixture in terms of the attacking credibility of the side that they're going up against. Not many of them have a ton of attacking threat. And although they could concede the odd goal, I expect some more clean sheets to come over the next few. So I do like Virgil van Dijk. I'm personally looking at him as one of my favourite replacements for Gabriel if he's ruled out for a while, or if he's even ruled out for 2 or 3 weeks, because the problem is now at this time of the season, even if he's ruled out for some sort of timeline between 2 to 4 weeks, he could miss as many as 4 or 5 game weeks, because we've got 3 games in the space of a week from game week 13 to 15. And that's only a week and a half away, 2 weeks away at time of recording. So it's not going to take a big injury layoff for him to miss a load of game weeks. Outside of Virgil van Dijk, I do also really like the Crystal Palace boys. A lot of you already have coverage here, but if you don't, Daniel Munoz looks like a really good pickup, great attacking threat, not actually all that bad on the defcons. And of course, Palace are a good defense with some really good fixtures to come. So Munoz makes a lot of sense. If you wanted to downgrade the position and use the money elsewhere, I also really quite like Chris Richards, who is even better on the defcon, much less attacking threat, of course, but for 1.2 million less, I think that's fine. And you can use that in pretty effective ways elsewhere. So would not have anything against someone downgrading the position to a 4.5. If you are looking at doing that, Richards would still be my favoured option. You could really risk it and take a bit of a punt on someone like a De Ligt, who's played really good minutes for Man United so far. And of course, Man United have some very good fixtures, but it is the price point that's putting me off. At 5 million, I still think I'd prefer Richards, and if I'm willing to spend 5 million on a Man United defender, I'd probably go one step further and use that extra money to spend it on maybe even a Munoz or a Virgil van Dijk, or even at the same price point, you can look at other 5 million options. If Guéhi's fit, Lacroix is also a good option at Palace. I think there are better alternatives out there, but some people are looking at De Ligt right now. I don't hate it, but I'm yet to be convinced, let's say. So another bit of injury news that has cropped up in the last 24 hours or so relates to Antoine Semenyo, obviously a very highly owned FPL asset. And it's a bit of a weird one, really, because this injury allegedly occurred last week on the Friday when he pulled up against Japan and went off in the 55th minute. Now, at the time, no one even noticed that this was an injury, or at least as far as I could see, no one noticed it was an injury. I didn't think anything of it, and I thought he was just being brought off for a little bit of a rest. And it's only come to light in the last 24 hours or so that it could have been because he pulled up with a bit of a ligament sprain. Now, the extent of the injury is as yet undefined, but it is at least a concern that we need to take a look at. I think as general advice before we all panic, because he is a very well-owned FPL asset with some good fixtures to come, I would try to wait on more news on this one. I wouldn't be making any early transfers on this one. I think there's less likelihood of him being out for a while than there is with Gabriel, but obviously both could still technically be fit because we haven't had confirmation yet. But Semenyo has also pulled out of international duty. He's gone back to Bournemouth. There are also some very good investigators on FPL X, or Twitter, however you want to call it, who have figured out that it might also be down to personal reasons that he left the camp early. It was actually his anniversary with his partner, and they were out over having dinner last night or something like that. I don't know the exact details, but there are some rumors that maybe the injury might not be a proper injury, and maybe it was he pulled out because of an anniversary. Who knows? All I would say is that, speculation aside, we should find out more about Semenyo in the next 48, 72 hours, certainly before the FPL deadline, because if he goes back to Bournemouth, he'll be back in training fairly soon. We should get training pictures. We'll definitely have a press conference with Iraola. We should get some information of some description before the deadline. Now, the interesting thing with Semenyo is if he is out for a little while, let's say it's a 2 to 4 week layoff again, a bit like Gabriel, he might miss a good stretch of game weeks, even if it's a short-term injury. So if we hear that he's definitely out of West Ham and then maybe out of game week 13, 14, then possibly even 15, I would probably say it's a sell. Now, at the moment, we don't have any such news, so I wouldn't be panicking, but it is at least sensible to have some ideas in place if he were to be ruled out. And again, I've included 6 options on screen here. A few of them are you would need some money to get up to them. So Fernandes and Burmo and Saka, you need a little bit of money to move up. But I think all three of which are worth paying the extra money for. Fernandes and Mbeumo, both with great fixtures to come. Take your pick, honestly, of the Man United players. I've had several videos over this international break where I'm trying to pick apart which one I would prefer in my team because I'm looking at them both. But either are good options. I think I very slightly veer towards Fernandes because it saves a future transfer, but both are great. And if you've got the money, I would suggest those two as good alternatives. Saka as well, if you've got the money to jump up even further, because he's also a decent captaincy option in the next few game weeks here and there, I would also prioritise him, possibly ahead of Fernandes or Mbeumo, to be honest. But of course, he costs a bit more money. Then you've got Phil Foden, which is a bit of an outlier, a bit of a weird one, because he's not been a good FPL pick whatsoever this season. But with good fixtures to come, and him getting very good minutes, and subjectively at least playing close to his best yet again, although he's not got anywhere near the sort of threat he had a couple of years ago, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start picking up more and more FPL returns and him becoming a bit of an interesting option over this next stretch if his minutes continue to be as strong as they are, because he does seem to be in good form, and historically we have relied on him to get some pretty explosive hauls. So don't rule him out. Maybe not one to go for in game week 12 specifically away at Newcastle, but if his minutes remain strong, I don't hate that one. And as a long-term pick, as a differential, not a bad one to be considering. Then you've got players from Liverpool like Gakpo, Szoboszlai could also be on this graphic. Szoboszlai, I'm put off a little bit by the 4 yellows. Gakpo, I'm put off by the risk of rotation and minutes. Wirtz can play left wing as well, as we've seen in the last couple of game weeks. So I probably wouldn't touch either of them, honestly. And then again, a bit like with Gabriel, there is the option to downgrade the position to maybe someone like a Minter, who's a lot cheaper, good underlying attacking threat, and very strong minutes over this period. Won't be going off to African Cup of Nations because his side didn't qualify. So he's another option where you can take some funds out and maybe spend them wisely elsewhere. So there are plenty of good options. I think it's Saka number one for me if you don't have him already and you've got the funds to get there. Then it'll be the Man United boys. And then I'd probably look at downgrading it to someone like a Minter after that. Of course, this is only on the proviso that he is indeed out of game week 12 and possibly even a bit longer as well. But at the moment, I still have doubts that he's even going to miss the West Ham game. I think he's probably going to be fine. But of course, we'll find out some more information in the next 72 hours or so. So hold off on those transfers for now. Right, so Gabriel and Semenyo are not the only injury doubts or suspensions worries going into game week 12. We've had a whole load of them. So I'm going to run through this section a little bit more quickly. I'm not going to look at each player in depth too much, but if your player is on this screen, it might just be something to investigate a little bit. Now, I'll talk about the injury doubts first. First up is Enzo. We knew about this before the international break. He did not go away with Argentina, so he could rest up. And I think he probably will be fit for game week 12. The second question, though, which makes this a little bit more complicated with Enzo, is whether or not he'll play anyway in game week 12, because it is Burnley away from home. And then afterwards, Chelsea go up against Barcelona, followed by Arsenal in the midweek, followed by game week 13 on the weekend after. So there is a chance that he gets reduced minutes in game week 12 just so he is ready for back-to-back very important games, very difficult, very challenging games after that anyway. So one to look out for, and I wouldn't have Enzo as a complete security for minutes ahead of game week 12. Next up, Calafiori did actually withdraw from international duty halfway through, so he's back at Arsenal resting up ahead of game week 12. The rumours, if they're to be believed, suggest that it's not a major injury, that it's a bit precautionary and he's probably going to be fine. So I wouldn't have too many worries ahead of game week 12, considering it's such an important game against Spurs at home, North London derby, of course. They will probably try to put out their strongest 11. So I think Calafiori will probably be fine, but just one to keep an eye on. Gahey is, again, an issue going into game week 12. We don't have any news either way, but he did spend some time with the England squad during the international break, which to me suggests at least it can't be a major injury. Even if he was on crutches for a couple of days after the injury occurred, it can't be that bad if he's happy to go away with England and not just be assessed by Crystal Palace and with the physios the whole time. So I don't think it's too bad. And I think him missing out in game week 11 was probably in the hope that he can then recover over the international break and be fit for game week 12. But another one to keep an eye on. Very similar with Kudus and with Gordon. I think they'll probably both be okay for game week 12. Kudus was touch and go for game week 11. So I think he'll probably be okay for game week 12. Gordon, a similar situation where I'd be surprised if he wasn't okay. But it's one where I would absolutely keep an eye out because we don't have any news either way on him right now. Nick Pope was taken off in game week 11 with a concussion substitution. So normal protocols would suggest that he should be back by game week 12. But we have seen even this season that sometimes there are complications with that. Alderete at Sunderland took a while longer to come back because of concussion. So again, just one to keep an eye on. I have him. I think he'll probably start, but do we even care if he starts against Man City? If you've got Dubravka on the bench, it might arguably be even better to start him regardless. So maybe not one to panic about all too much. Across to the returning players, and I think this is the interesting part here because there are knock-on repercussions to a few of these. Now, Alisson, I think, could be back for game week 12. I know that they were looking at him returning after the November international break. So at under 5.5 million, he could be an interesting, slightly cheaper route into the Liverpool backline if you weren't convinced on Virgil van Dijk. But goalkeeper transfers are rarely high upside, and a lot of you already have Raya, so maybe not one to be ripping up your side for. Cole Palmer is another one that was targeting a post-November international break return, so keep an eye out for him returning to the side. That might have knock-on repercussions to João Pedro and Enzo. Whichever one of them is on penalties might lose those penalties, and it also might have some positional repercussions for Enzo in particular. He might have to drop a little bit deeper to incorporate Palmer into the starting 11. But do we know for sure he's going to be back for game week 12? No. So not one to be steaming into right now and buying, but if he's in training, if it looks likely that he's going to start in game week 12, could be an interesting option pretty soon yet again. It's just a shame that it's Barcelona then Arsenal after game week 12 is out of the way, because you're probably not going to risk him for Burnley in the hopes that he plays Barcelona and Arsenal. Those are two very important games. You probably wait until those games to play him, right? Or at least that's the way I'd play it. Two Arsenal boys coming back. Gyökeres might be back pretty soon. Not many of us own him anymore, but one to look out for. And Madueke, who isn't much of an FPL asset, but again, it might just have those slight knock-on effects on someone like a Bukayo Saka, who will start the majority of games, I'm sure, but will he get minutes reduced if he's got an able deputy on that right-hand side? We've seen Saka be kind of run into the ground before by Arteta, where he just plays him no matter what, 90 minutes a match, and then he breaks down into the second half of the season. Are they going to be a bit more cautious with him this year to make sure that he is fit for the title charge? I think it is quite likely that they do that. So whether or not Madueke starts one of the upcoming games, or maybe just gets minutes off the bench and Saka gets reduced minutes, that is one to look out for. But again, I wouldn't be panicking just yet. It's just one to keep an eye on. Suspended players, this one's really easy, really quick. Dan Burns suspended against Man City. You probably weren't playing him anyway, let's face it, but it might make Haaland a more interesting captaincy choice, considering Pope's a doubt and Dan Burns a doubt as well. So what's that backline going to look like? We don't know for sure. And although Dan Burn against Haaland, you would back Haaland, I still think any time a player that is locked into that starting 11 is not available, it does make them slightly weaker. So maybe Haaland is a better captaincy shout now against Newcastle than we previously would have thought. Finally, we've got Paqueta away at Bournemouth. Not a great fixture, or certainly not an amazing fixture, is also suspended after picking up his 5th yellow of the season. Again, one that you can probably hide on your bench if you do have him. He's not got high ownership, but it might be an excuse to get rid of him. If you do, there are other options at his price point or around his price point that I probably prefer to him anyway, like a Yankuba Minter, for instance, or even down to someone like an Elliot Anderson. So maybe one to have a quick think about if you are a Paqueta owner ahead of Game Week 12. Right, so I just wanted to wrap up this video with a little bit of a cautionary tale, I suppose, going into what is a very busy period of the season. We've got our first midweek game week of the year coming pretty soon. So Game Week 12 and Game Week 13 are a week apart. So we've got Game Week 12 starting this weekend, Game Week 13 the following weekend on the 29th of November. But then Game Week 14 starts just a couple of days later on the Tuesday, the 2nd of December. So it's a very quick turnaround from Game Week 13 to 14. And then the same goes from 14 to 15, because 15 is on the weekend after. So we've got 3 game week deadlines in the space of 7 days and 3 matches being played for every Premier League club within that time as well. So with that in mind, what we need to look out for here is some sort of rotation. Now, it's not going to be every single player, and I wouldn't go over the top. Quite often at this time of season, we all panic a little bit too much, and we think there's just going to be mass rotation in that middle game, so game week 14 in this example, and that every squad is just going to completely change their starting 11. It never quite happens that way. It's never quite as strong as that. However, it is worth noting that if you've got any players in your squad that are even slight minutes doubts that do sometimes get rotated in a standard game week, or maybe they've got a really able deputy, game week 14 is where I might be a little bit worried about their minutes. Obviously, it can happen in game week 13 or 15. There are risks attached to all of these game weeks, but the most logical one where they would rotate is game week 14. But it is based on individual circumstances. So if one Premier League club, let's say, has an easy game week 13, but then a really difficult 14 and 15, they might rotate in game week 13 when they feel like they can afford to, and then have their strongest possible 11 back to back in 14 and 15. If that makes any sense. I'm not sure if I've worded that very well for you, but hopefully you're following along with me. All I would say is don't panic, don't overreact to it. But if you've got any significant minutes risks, I would look at maybe transferring them out over the next week or two, or at least have a deep enough squad that you can cope with some rotation. So this is the time of year where I'd like to stack up on my bench a little bit, make sure that I've got at least one pretty solid option on my bench that I don't mind playing coming off my bench in any given game week, and make sure your rotations work as well. So in game week 14, just make sure that the players that are naturally on your bench don't have the world's worst fixtures, and you wouldn't be happy for them to come off your bench in times of crisis. So just a bit of a cautionary tale, nothing to panic about too much, but just make sure that you're well equipped for game week 13, 14 and 15, because those game weeks do come thick and fast and we need to react very quickly. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and, importantly, subscribe to the channel. I'll be back later on this week as we take a look at my team selection with 4 free transfers, so plenty to decide yet ahead of game week 12.